Goldie, a parable. When it comes to parenting, every generation gets it wrong. They're here. My parents got it wrong. I got it wrong. And not to pass too much judgment too early, but I'd bet the parents buying Pampers and pacifiers right now are getting it wrong too. To be fair, I don't think my mother intentionally scarred us. But growing up as an only child, she was not prepared to handle the chaos and warfare her four children produced. By the time I was 7, she'd figured out it was easier to raise 2 boys and 2 girls by limiting her interaction with us. Go outside and play wasn't offered as an opportunity to appreciate nature, nor was it a suggestion. It was our after-school activity. And it didn't faze her even a little if I came screeching up to the back door in tears, pointing a finger at one of my brothers. I don't care who started it, I'm stopping it, was the judicial system we grew up with. Nothing moved my mother, not the boys' bullying, and not Chicago's winters. We weren't welcome indoors until she rang the cowbell. Did we die? We did not. It was the 70s, and the prevailing child-rearing philosophy, as I call it, was benign neglect. My father took that philosophy one step further. Remember that movie, Home Alone, where the family flies off to Paris while inadvertently leaving the youngest kid behind? We get a kick out of that plot, because in the movie, leaving a kid behind is an accident. In my family, when we flew off to Brazil, my parents knew they were leaving Betsy behind. Her connecting flight from college had been delayed due to a snowstorm. She'll figure it out, was the parenting wisdom my father offered as the rest of us boarded our flight to South America. She's resilient. He wasn't wrong. My sister Betsy is resilient. She did figure it out, even though this was in the time before cell phones, before ATMs, before kids had one of their parents' credit cards for just-in-case emergencies, like getting left behind in the airport. Did she die? She did not. In fact, she got to Sao Paulo before the rest of us. Because back then, an 18-year-old girl crying at JFK did not end in tragedy. It ended in an invitation onto a chartered plane heading her way. My father wasn't wrong about Betsy. Still, not necessarily the type of parenting one chooses to emulate. Having children of our own offered my sister and me the opportunity to correct for what we perceived were the shortcomings of our parents' parenting. The way Betsy corrected for being left behind is brilliant. Whenever she can, she flies first class. She also makes a point of never leaving any of her 3 children behind, unless you count saying goodbye to them as she and her husband head toward row 2 and their kids settle somewhere behind row 29. My sister is not heartless. On more than one flight, she's expressed her maternal love by asking the flight attendant to send a warm cookie back to her kids. I once asked her how the 3 kids divided the single cookie. No idea, she said. There's a curtain between us. Did her children die? They did not. When my daughters were born, motorized parenting was in its infancy. Helicoptering, hovering, snow plowing, bulldozing, all of it represented the pendulum swinging opposite of benign neglect. Motor-driven parents were engaged, aware, involved, and most appealing to me, protective. Protect my precious darlings. I believed that was all I was ever trying to do. In my defense, the goldfish did not look like a gateway to bad parenting. It looked like a 2-inch answer to my 5-year-old daughter's prayers. We had no dog, no hamster, and no plans to compromise our allergy-sensitive household. Every night, Charlotte wept over the injustice of not having a pet to love. And every night, I felt like a failure for not protecting her from this pain. That's why the sight of her at the preschool carnival broke me. Seeing her stare at that little fish in its plastic baggie triggered my desire to fix what hurt her. I handed over a quarter, and Goldie joined the family. Walking into PetSmart should have jolted some sense into me. One sniff of the urine-saturated air was all it took to remind me how little I liked animals. Breathing through my mouth, I reminded myself, this was about Charlotte, not about me. Into the cart went a fishbowl and some food. Over time, Goldie's bowl moved from my daughter's dresser to her desk to her nightstand. Every day began with, "Good morning, Goldie," and every night ended with, "I love you, Goldie." With one tiny fish, I'd shielded my child from unhappiness. And then, one night, while making the last maternal sweep over the household, I noticed something strange. Charlotte was sleeping peacefully, but Goldie was missing. I went in search of a flashlight. Had my daughter scooped up her goldfish for a snuggle? I peered at my sleeping child, moving the light over her pillow and blanket. No Goldie. I pulled back the covers, half expecting to find the fish silhouetted against the sheets. No Goldie. I did a quick 360, looking for a glass, a Tupperware, something that might be a sleep-away arrangement for a fish with a 5-year-old owner. Nothing. Getting down on my hands and knees, I scanned the carpet, and then I gasped. Out of her bowl, way under my daughter's bed, the flashlight's beam caught the orange tint of a dorsal fin. Crawling on my belly, I reached for Goldie, cupping her in my hand and feeling my heart sink. There in my palm, I held 2 inches of goldfish, covered in carpet lint and totally inert. I clicked off the flashlight and sat still for a moment. So this is it, I thought, as I tiptoed to the bathroom and lifted the lid. The thought of Charlotte's 5-year-old heart breaking was agony. I so wanted to protect my daughter from loss, but what choice did I have? Goldie was dead. These were my thoughts as I held the little fish, summoning the courage to flush her into eternal rest. Just before I let go, Goldie flicked her tail. My damn heart nearly gave out. Without thinking, I ran back to Charlotte's room, pulled off as much lint as I could, and dropped Goldie into the bowl. The next morning, I held my breath. I dreaded my child's anguish. Time passed. No noise. I went into her room. "Goldie's swimming funny," Charlotte said. I took a look. Goldie's tail was jerking, and she was moving through the water like she was drunk. Rather than explain the previous night's jump, I went for the pivot. Time for breakfast. And while Char was at school, I did a little internet research. It seemed possible Goldie had executed an epic leap and then thrashed her way under the bed. I called PetSmart. Our goldfish jumped out of her bowl and rolled around on the carpet. When I found her, she was kind of fuzzy, so I pulled off the lint and dropped her back in the bowl. Now she's swimming funny. Is that a thing? The guy on the phone did not hesitate. Yeah, that happens. You got a jumper. You probably shouldn't have pulled off that lint. I'm thinking you might have removed some of the fish's protective slime coating. Slime coating? Yeah. Uh-huh. It's kind of this mucoprotein that contains enzymes and antibodies, and it helps the goldfish fight stuff like infections, parasites, fungal pathogens. It's pretty important. The guy kept talking, using phrases like highly stressful experience for the fish, and maybe if you got an aerated tank, and you'll need to get some antibiotic fish food. I'm pretty sure those were the exact words he used at the end of his dissertation on how to extend the life of my daughter's 25-cent pet. An hour later, I entered PetSmart with a reasonable parenting intention: to purchase a replacement fish. Oh. A giant tub held hundreds of Goldie's relatives, and they all looked the same, sort of, except for their tails. Goldie, in the 12 hours since jumping, had lost the bottom half of hers. Maybe it wasn't going to be so easy, swapping one goldfish for another. A better parent would have recognized the death of a goldfish is inevitable. A better parent would have recognized the loss of a pet offers an ideal entry-level conversation about how all lives must end and about how love shared is never love wasted. A better parent would have seized the opportunity to help her daughter navigate sadness and loss, no matter how painful. I was not that better parent. Remember, I was course correcting for a childhood of benign neglect. I was the parent preoccupied with bubble wrapping my child. Staring into the tub of goldfish who did not look like Goldie, I made a bad choice. $200 later, I returned home with a 20-gallon tank, an aquarium air pump, and a container of antibiotic fish food. Goldie transitioned to her new home beautifully. Eventually, her tail grew back, although she still swam like she was on a bender. Occasionally, she'd even swim upside down. And then she started to learn tricks. If we tapped twice on her tank, she pressed her mouth to the glass to blow us a kiss. If we tapped on the side with the fish food container, she'd swim to the surface and take a flake from our fingers. At some point, Charlotte wasn't the only one in the family to stand and stare at Goldie. All of us were convinced this was some fish. 3 years passed until, without warning, Goldie went to bed a swimmer and woke up a floater. Oh. A child in the throes of grieving is heartbreaking. It doesn't matter that the corpse measures under 2 inches. The enormity of the loss belies the slightness of the earthly remains. And so it was with Goldie's passing. There were tears and full body sobs. Charlotte, now 8, seemed inconsolable. My protective parenting went into overdrive. How could saying a few words before flushing Goldie give my daughter proper closure? In the span of a few minutes, every ritual related to death became purposeful. Wrapping Goldie in a shroud of Kleenex, we made funeral arrangements. We invited Grandma and Aunt Betsy to join the service and burial. Then we wrapped Goldie again, this time in aluminum foil, before placing her in the freezer to keep until after school. At the appointed hour, we gathered. We built a small fire and laid Goldie at the edge. Cremation, we agreed, was the appropriate thing. Each of us took turns saying a few words. Goldie was a great goldfish. Goldie was a great jumper. Goldie was the only goldfish in the history of goldfish to do tricks. We loved her, and we would miss her. There wasn't a dry eye among us. With tongs, I lifted Goldie from the fire, then led the processional to the back of the yard. Charlotte tucked Goldie into the ground like she was tucking her into bed, patting the dirt as if it were a blanket that would forever keep her warm. Standing in a circle, we shared a moment of silence before adjourning for a funereal dinner of chicken fingers and pasta with Parmesan cheese. Later that night, I watched as Charlotte explained Goldie's death to her stuffed bear. I thought my daughter might follow in my footsteps, trying to protect him from sadness the way I had tried to protect her. Instead, Charlotte didn't flinch. In explaining Goldie's death to her bear, she was gentle and direct. She explained, sometimes life is sad. Then she kissed her bear, rolled over, and that was it. That was it? Did Charlotte fall apart after Goldie died? She did not. She was resilient. Did the elaborate funeral help her process the loss? No idea. It's been over 20 years, and I've never heard her speak of it, not even once. I think about that 25-cent fish and my naive belief that the story of Goldie is about Charlotte and not about me. It makes me think the way we parent is the way we wish we'd been parented. Such a little fish, such a big lesson.